And we're going to
Recording in progress.
call the meeting to order. Forgot to ask PCT if they were ready. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Bowles.
Here?
Councilmember Big Stick.
Present.
Councilmember Beer.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer.
Present.
Mayor Vaterlas.
Here. And I want to remind everyone to please place a parking pass on your dashboard. They are downstairs in the hallway, just so we don't want you to get a ticket for coming to do your civic duty. And I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. The city of Pacifica acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We honor the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples for their enduring commitment to Mother Earth. As the indigenous protectors of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all people who reside in their traditional territory. We affirm their sovereign rights as First People and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. Now, Mayor Big Stick will lead Council Member Big Stick, former mayor, will lead us in the flag salute.
Thank you, current mayor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now we move on to the consent calendar. Do any council members wish to pull any items from consent? I'm seeing none. Are there any public members who would like to pull anything from consent? Anyone on the phone? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to council.
I have a couple of questions about item 3.
Okay.
And I think I see there's someone from fire here.
Yeah, Councilmember Bowles, Fire Marshal Craig Whitner is here in case he's the most appropriate to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I don't need to pull the item, but I wanted to talk a little bit about inspections related to short-term rentals, and especially some of the larger ones that we have in town that are, hosting a number of people. So I had asked in my written questions what the official definition of a lodging house was, because that's one of the categories that I believe you all are to inspect. And then I was referred to the 2021 International Fire Code that defined it as a one-family dwelling where one or more occupants are primarily permanent in nature and rent is paid for guest rooms. The IFC further clarifies the definition of maximum occupant load of a lodging house in order to remain in the R3 classification, which is 10 or fewer transient persons. So I'm sorry, I'm just kind of trying to understand these definitions. And then in our own municipal code, it defines a hotel as meaning a building portion thereof containing 6 or more guest rooms designed or intended to be used, let, or hired out to be occupied, or which are occupied by 6 or more individuals for compensation. So I understand that you're not currently checking fire safety for short-term rentals, but I understand that some other cities have opted to do so, and just kind of wanted to get your thoughts, because we have a number that are more than 6 bedrooms and an even greater number that have, more than the 6 people, up to 16 people that are staying overnight. that aren't inspected before they become short-term rentals right now, and then, aren't regularly inspected for safety. And I'm just curious what your thoughts and experience are, if you think that's something that we may want to consider.
And Councilmember
adding.
Bowles, if I may just jump in, and then before I turn it over
Yeah.
to Fire Marshal Whitner. Concerning fire department inspection of short-term rentals, that's a program that the council could review and consider and direct when we do the short-term rental ordinance update process. There's probably numerous areas of our ordinance and state law and such that need to be reviewed to make it clear that such short-term rentals would be part of the program, and we'd be able to charge them the fee
Right.
that's required. So we don't do that. It's probably pretty complex to get there, but it's certainly something the council should or would, I presume, consider when you do review the entire short-term rental ordinance.
Yeah, I understand that would be the best scenario, but and we'll talk about this at goal setting, if this gets pushed down the line, these are some life safety issues for people coming, and I'm just wondering if that's something that we could potentially, bump up on the priority list of items to consider as a single thing, if we're still waiting to do the ordinance.
Yeah, again, I think in this comes up occasionally about different little simple things we might do in advance of the holistic short-term ordinance review. Even reviewing small things would require staff time and focus that, we're planning staff and the city attorney's office we're all focused on a bunch of other priorities. So I'd want that direction from the full council to do that and be able to evaluate what else would fall off the plate to accelerate any particular aspect of the program. But I think with the short-term rentals program, so much of the aspects of that program are all integrated. So the number of people that the council may want to allow in an ordinance revision that could exist in a short-term rental, that would relate to then state law about what that occupancy is defined as. And I'm just trying to express that biting off little pieces has come up before and occasionally, and I think it needs to be considered as a whole program.
Yeah. I guess part of my question really to fire is, do you see this as a potential hazard, given, the number of people that are potentially, visitors staying in one house for a short amount of time, with recurring groups of up to 16 people?
Ma'am, it could be. The simplest way I can put it in other communities that I've conversed with regarding this very same topic is communities hadn't dealt with it until the short-term rental program created complaints in the community from neighborhoods. It changed the use and character of the neighborhood, parking, noise, et cetera, and then communities chose to deal with them. Could there be life safety issues that would need to be addressed? Most certainly, and we would certainly address those. But just to kind of answer your question, your concern earlier regarding 10 or more people, generally the code views the fewer occupants there are, the looser provisions or the fewer provisions there are. And then as the occupant load increases, the provisions become a little tougher. So by definition in the international codes, and then again in the California codes, they look at 10 or fewer people. They want those to operate similar to an R3 or traditional single-family dwelling occupancy. And then they further say that greater than 10 would be operated more closely to an R2 or perhaps an apartment-style occupancy. Mm-hmm. And then even greater, I'd say perhaps up to 16, it depends on the configuration. They look at it as operating potentially like an R1 occupancy. And then again, with definitions, I would say California makes it a little difficult sometimes to interpret without knowing the exact, style of structure, amount of stories, and so forth. But yeah, we could certainly inspect those for a safety. And I will also say that some of the other communities I've spoken to about this subject, their concern was people that visit the community, they're unfamiliar with their immediate surroundings. Right. They don't know where the fire extinguisher is. Are they certain that the smoke alarms work? Do the sliding glass doors and windows work? Those types of things. So that's what they included in their STR inspection program for the basic safety measures that we all have control over in our own homes, but don't otherwise have control over in a rental that we stay. So we could certainly look at those.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your input.
That's it for questions. Would someone like to make a motion?
Mayor Vaterlaus, we had one raised hand after close of public comment.
Okay, I will reopen the public comment for the commenter on the phone.
It is for Cliff Lawrence.
Okay. Cliff, go ahead.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, yes,
no,
definitely.
expecting that. Apparently you can. Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. No, I've got that muted. Sorry. What I was hearing there does seem to track back to what we were talking about before. How we regard a unit of a STP or one of these temporary housing things. And the issue before was, are we counting a per unit or a building that has multiple units as one? What you're hearing tonight should beg the question, do we get enough information in the permit process that would tell us how many people potentially are involved? Because as our fire representative has just told us, it's the number of people that drives their inspection, and it also drives
Cliff.
the element
Cliff.
of risk.
We're really not discussing the short-term rental issue. We will be.
We're really not discussing the short-term rental issue. We will be really not discussing the short-term rental issue. We will be really not discussing the short-term rental issue.
Oh, you muted him? Yeah. Okay. We will be discussing that at our goal-setting meeting on March the 9th, so feel free to attend that meeting, and we will discuss short-term rentals at that time.
And he can make a comment during open communication.
Yes.
Right.
And you can make a comment during public comment period. Okay. So seeing no one else, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to council.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Please vote.
And with the motion to approve the consent calendar made by Councilmember Bowles and seconded by Councilmember Beer, the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Big Stick. Okay. Okay, now we're moving on to public comments for items not on the posted agenda. This portion of the agenda is available for the public to address the City Council on any issue that is not on the agenda. Any person wishing to address the council shall be recognized by the mayor during this time, provided, however, that only items not on the agenda for that meeting may be addressed. Comments on non-agendized items must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If comments do not address matters within the subject matter of the city will provide you with an initial warning to stay within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If the warning is not followed, the mayor will direct the city clerk to cut off the microphone. Council members shall not enter into a debate with speakers under public comments on items not on the posted agenda. A maximum of 3 minutes will be allowed for any speaker. Okay, so the first card I have is Bill Michaelis.
Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Good evening. What are you doing this Thursday between 7 and 9?
Singing.
Have I got a deal for you? I do. Again, we've got Black History Month. Happy Lunar New Year. Happy 2024 again. But I do have a deal for you. Something free and uplifting with refreshments, building on the no hate and positive love sign that's in front of you. Something that'll leave you feeling good about yourself, your neighbors, your community, and conscious of the challenges in front of us. Something that emphasizes the positive values of peace, justice, and kindness. Something that might even help counterbalance your mood if you've been watching too much TV. Thanks to Mary Beer and the collaborative, the Pacifica Collaborative, and Cindy Abbott and the Sanchez Art Center and Pacificans Care, we're holding a Leap into Kindness event, a sing-along at the Mildred Owen Center this Thursday, Leap Day, February 29th, led by 3 very talented musicians, with us singing familiar songs with lyrics provided and projected on a big screen. No singing experience is required. It can be, for some of you, remember if you were in a choir or a singing group way back when and they told you, just move your lips, that's okay too, you know? But the event is going to be very, very uplifting, and it's really going to try to, again, build on the positiveness that we're trying to put out there with the community. You can find out a lot more by going to AMPJC, which is Art for More Peaceful and Just Community.org. And this is the wonderful, you should have maybe seen some of these around the community. There's some in the back of the room. A beautiful poster done by Joel Fontaine. And we're very blessed that he was able to do that. Or you can go to pacificanscare.org for an entire press release in addition to the digital copies of this. So I just wanted to close by just inviting everybody out there to come and join us. Again, no singing experience required, just the good heart that you've got. And we've got all those kind of people in this community, as you know. So I'll close with a couple of quotes of mine, not of mine, but that I'm very motivated by.
Bill?
Yes.
Your time is up.
My time is up. Can I end with that last quote? It takes 2 seconds.
Okay.
2 seconds. As a great civil rights leader, Harriet Tubman, said over 100 years ago, life is a hard battle anyway, and if we laugh and sing a little as we fight the good fight of freedom, it makes it go easier.
Thank you.
Come join us.
Thank you. Okay, the next card I have is Adrian Zanini. Or do you have a specific order? Okay. So I do have a person who said first on here. So Linda Peebles.
Good evening. Is that okay? I'm on my toes. Good evening. My name is Linda Peebles, and I'm here tonight representing Pacifica Peace People, a number of them behind me. And I'd like to read a peace resolution written by our group. We had hoped that this resolution would make it onto the agenda and be passed by the City Council. That has not happened. So we're now calling it Pacifica, the People's Resolution for Peace and Reconciliation. Whereas the beautiful city of Pacifica, which means peace, stands committed to the belief that all human life is precious in all communities and nations of the world, regardless of national, ethnic, political, or religious affiliations or identities. And whereas recent and ongoing armed violence and destruction have resulted in the tragic loss of thousands of lives of Palestinians and Israelis. And whereas these brutal attacks have caused ongoing shock, trauma, grief, and fear to those who directly experience them, as well as to those watching these horrors unfold. And whereas Islamophobia and anti-Semitism have risen significantly across the United States and around the world with direct impact on communities, including Pacifica, from synagogues and mosques to schools, universities, offices, and wherever people gather. And whereas the people in Gaza have been effectively cut off from basic life necessities and have been displaced multiple times, resulting in mass starvation and ongoing crisis, and whereas the majority of nations in the United Nations
You have 1 more minute.
have voted for a ceasefire resolution, and millions of people worldwide, including residents of Pacifica, have joined in peace actions since October 7 to amplify the call for human rights, peace, and justice. And whereas we recognize that we are globally connected through our shared humanity, and that our actions, however local, carry global implications. Now be it resolved, the people of the city of Pacifica join the calls from the growing number of cities across our country and the world for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and Israel, and the safe return of all hostages, detainees, immediate unconditional provision of life-saving humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, and the initiation of reconciliation and a viable peace process for Israelis and Palestinians to create a better future for all.
Thank you, Linda. Adrian? Or,
I can do this. Okay.
Okay.
Hi there. Good evening. Adrienne Zanini. The time, it's just devastating every day when we wake up and we read the paper or listen to the news or see, and the killing has got to stop, and there has to be a new way to bring forth peace in this world for all of us. And we don't want to create any division here. It's just that we want peace to reign. We want people to be safe. We want kids to be able to run and play. And we want the things that we all want for our kids. Thank you.
thank you. Marcia Murphy, followed by Ellen Haig.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcia Murphy from Lindemar, and I just want to say bad things happen when good people refuse to do things. So I do support the Pacifica Peace Peoples resolution. Thank you.
Ellen, followed by Suzanne.
Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Ellen Haig. I'm a resident of Pacifica. I'm here this evening to support the Pacifica Peace Peoples resolution for peace and reconciliation. I just have a few thoughts. There's so much that can be said for such a heartbreaking situation in the world. So first of all, Sunday night, if you haven't seen it, 60 Minutes carried a segment on Gaza that I would recommend to you. And it's really important that we know about what's happening in the world so we can take action. My good friend is from Gaza, and he's already lost many members of his family in Gaza, including his young nieces and nephews, young children. The death toll now is nearing 30,000 in Gaza. Tragically, today, a young U.S. airman died from self-immolation in despair. Before he set himself on fire, he said he would no longer be complicit in genocide. There's a well-known quote, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph in the world is that good men do nothing." So tonight, I stand with the peacemakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, followed by Gloria Stofan, and then Flo Chang.
Suzanne Moore. Tonight we have the opportunity to consider a Pacifica Peace People resolution to promote peace in the Middle East, but we fear the voices of opposition, and that's impacted our ability this evening. Abraham Lincoln said, "It often requires more courage to dare to do right than to fear to do wrong." The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. We must think anew and act anew. So I'm choosing this evening to rise to the occasion with my colleagues and friends. I support the peace resolution as presented by the Pacifica Peace People. Thank you.
Thank you. Gloria and then Flo.
Good evening, City Council members and city staff. My name's Gloria Stoffen, longtime resident of Pacifica. I come before you with peace on my mind to show my support to the Pacifica Peace People and to acknowledge the beautifully written People's Resolution for Peace and Reconciliation. I cannot remain silent when so many are suffering in Syria, Somalia, Ukraine, and in particular the Middle East. What's happening to civilians along the Gaza Strip is horrific and inhumane. It's insanity. As the saying goes, war is not healthy for children and other living things. I am proud to stand with my PPP members who care and support justice and human rights, in particular in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you. Flo? And that's our last card, Flo, so if anybody else would like to speak, please fill out a card.
Good evening, Honorable City Council. I'm Flo Chang, my lifetime resident of Pacifica. I understand that Pacifica is in the midst of getting its housing element proposal approved, and I have seen how you all work tirelessly to meet the needs of the community. You have listened to our voices and advocated on our behalf. I ask you now to extend that same dedication for a future ceasefire resolution. Innocent civilians, Palestinians and Israeli alike, have been unjustly targeted. Palestinians in particular are starving in a man-made famine, losing limbs and family members, and watching the real-time destruction of their homes, communities, and cultural centers. Entire cities in Gaza, cities like Pacifica that have worked to serve its people and provide lifelong homes, have been bombed to nothing. You all approved allocating low-income housing in larger number than required by the state for our housing element. Pacifica is uniquely positioned and has the qualities of compassion-driven ideals to show solidarity. We have the opportunity to push policy forward and to show our state, our nation, our world, and our own community here what it means to act in love and solidarity. We will look for the best in your hearts, and we will keep coming back to urge you to do the same. Free Palestine and ceasefire now. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, is there anyone on the phone?
We have one raised hand. It is for Cliff Lawrence.
Okay, Cliff, go ahead.
Hello, good evening again. My apologies for being inappropriate on the comments out of schedule on the menu.
No problem.
As for peace, let's not forget that war is war, and it doesn't matter where it is. It is not something that we should support. Whether it's in the Middle East, it's in the Ukraine, it's in many African countries that are suffering huge losses today. Ukraine now entering its third year of its war. But while I applaud that, my point that I hope to raise this evening is not only should we identify our community as being supporting peace, I think there is another identity which we might adopt that might help us see who we are and where we're going. And what I'm saying is, we have this wonderful community that if it's defined by nothing else, it's defined by its open space. This is what makes Pacifica so spectacular. Its wonderful air qualities, its trails, all those things. Is it time for Pacifica to look at becoming a defined blue zone? And it would be the only place in Northern California that did that. What would the impact be? We could leverage all this wonderful space we have, wonderful air, and I would hope and believe this could make a difference on our economic sustainability. It would definitely give us a new vision of who we are. And I thank you all.
Thank you, Cliff. Seeing no one else, I will close public comment and bring it back to council for council communications. Tiger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's hard to hear all of that and not respond in some way. And what I'll tell you to begin with is that as I'm trying to think of a response off the fly, what immediately occurs to me is I don't want to offend those who are in the room, nor do I wish to spurn any form of anger. And that might sound odd to especially this crowd in the room because all of you are dedicated to peace, so why would somebody be concerned that I might anger you? But that's one of the first thoughts that occurs to me. If I don't say the thing you want to hear, which, by the way, this is the thought that occurs to me when anybody is sitting in this room, it's not just you. If I don't say the thing you want to hear, your first reaction might, and I said might, have something to do with anger. And so I'm taking that into consideration as I do when I'm speaking in front of anybody and saying thank you for being here. I appreciate the message. I appreciate the resolution. I do have a slight divergence in terms of whether or not I think it's appropriate for us to take it up because I think that at the end of the day, we need to make sure we're sticking to city business. And I'm not just saying that as a way to hide behind a thing. I'm looking at other cities around the area as I'm saying something like that. I have friends in San Bruno, for example, who have really been going through it lately because they were brave enough to try and take a stab at it. And so as I'm trying to figure out what level of appropriateness it is to speak against Hamas and their terrorism, to speak against Netanyahu, who, as far as I'm concerned, should have been in a jail cell before any of this even began, I have to weigh that against the appropriateness of doing the city business. And so that's kind of where I'm oriented. And within that context, I want to thank you all for being here, which is slightly further than what I usually say, that Israel and Gaza are both in my heart, as is Ukraine, who also is fighting a bully in their terms. So thank you for whatever that's worth. In terms of what I've been doing this last couple of weeks, I spent some time talking to a representative from Insurance Commissioner Laura's office because I'm trying to understand how flood insurance works and wrap my head around what affects it. And so that's a big chunk of the research I've been doing going into Saturday's big meeting about the local coastal land use plan, which will be held at Terra Nova at 9:30. I'm trying to get that piece straight in my mind, so that's why I talked to the California Insurance Office. I had, Elise Lester with Mark Berman's office was kind enough to offer to sit in on that meeting so that the state assembly member has an idea of what we're going through over here as we're navigating our coastal issues. And I've also been following up with NSU's representative who has been further fleshing that out for me as I'm able to concoct whatever question that might help me get closer to it. I attended Joe Simidian's event, reaching out to the Broadmoor Police Protection District, which has something to do with my role in LAFCO. There was a congressional candidates forum through the city Dems. I was grateful to be able to attend that. I attended the Coastal Cities Quarterly Forum, which was held for electeds, which our chair, Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer, was at the helm for, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty more about that, but they were going over the OPEC results, and that was interesting to hear as an elected. A little later that day, I had a meeting with a representative from CORA, which is Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse. They've been engaged in their program training businesses and other interested parties how to identify the signs of intimate partner abuse and facilitate an understanding of the better ways to address that when that awareness comes about. There was a Peninsula Clean Energy meeting on the 22nd. I'm very proud to be a part of a board that chose to freeze the levels of how much we charge for electricity, where PG&E has been raising those charges. Unfortunately, that doesn't affect the rise in rates for gas and transmission, but Peninsula Clean Energy has been able to freeze the rates in place where they've been. Congratulations to Kirsten Andrews-Schwind, who recently got a raise through PCE. She's a member of Pacifica Citizenry. Another big one, we launched the turnkey electrification installation service. The idea being essentially if you want to start electrifying your home, there's going to be kind of this one-stop shop where you say, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and our service will take you through all the parts. As a renter, I've been engaged in just trying to get an electric heat pump water heater installed. And so I have the luxury of working with PCE staff to understand who's a good contractor to call on and what are the grants available. And the privilege I have as being a member of the board, having access to that staff, is soon a program that will be available to everyone who has the interest in electrifying. So I'm really proud of that pilot project underway, and we also discussed project ownership potential of producing electricity in the future. We went to the Council of Cities at Daly City, where Representative Phil Ting spoke, and there was also a representative of Rainbow Bridge that spoke. And then I attended the Sports Hall of Fame dinner on Saturday, where Jack Burgett was honored briefly. It was good to see Coach Bill Gray, who flew out from South Dakota, who was my PE teacher. And so I got to spend time with him, which was always a treat. And congratulations to Brent Crowley, Natalie Talbot-Thorne, Gary Hernandez, and Keith Hernandez. And that's what I've been up to.
Sue Beckmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. It was a pretty busy week, couple weeks for me. Luckily enough, my day job was off last week, so I had plenty of time to develop a better understanding of the Ocean Protection Council guidance, to which Council Member Big Stick referred. I'm beginning to feel like I am getting a handle on it, so I'm almost ready to be able to answer questions. I'll do my very best if I don't have the answers to find out. What this guidance, as I've mentioned before, is designed to do is to encompass and to collect the best available science on sea level rise for purposes of permitting and project planning for California cities, counties, agencies, It is a big undertaking. All of the numbers in that report are articulated with the NOAA numbers for sea level rise that are provided for the entire country. And the idea here is that it is dialed in for California specifically. Excuse me. So some of the key takeaways of that guidance are that they're still using the same planning horizon and looking ahead to 2050, 2100, and then adding the year 2150 as long-range planning for infrastructure and looking ahead to what sea level rise will be like on the California coast. One of the big takeaways that was evident in this guidance that wasn't as much stressed in past years, this is the 4th time since 2010 that this guidance has been released. There's a vertical land movement measure that is being looked at as a big influence. And you hear about this, we don't have this problem here in Pacifica, but you do hear about it in some areas of the state. There's actual subsidence where ground is sinking. And so sea level rise numbers that had been formerly projected they're not seeing the rise, the sea rise the same because the floor, if you will, is lowering. So that's another number that needs to be tracked. There's a lot of emphasis on the weather impacts of sea rise or of climate change and how that is impacting sea rise. And so looking at sea level rise as a discrete measure unto itself really doesn't tell the full picture, is really what it comes down to. And a lot of these factors have to be taken into account to be able to give an accurate picture of what the forecast is for a given area in the state. One thing that happened in this guidance compared to the last guidance is there's more of a scenario-based look at what will happen, and the focus is on what is going on with emissions. And so the scenarios where we hear so much about how much we are going to be experiencing with emissions and what does that mean for global warming and what does that mean in terms of its impacts on weather events and such. So that's a big one. And the upshot for us locally and in the, it's hard to say near term, but 2050 into 2100 is that the projections from the prior guidance have been lowered based on actual comparison with actual data gathering. In the former guidance up to the year 2100, there was a measure called H++, which was the highest, most conservative view of what sea level rise would be. And it was on the order of 10 to 11 feet of sea level rise. At this juncture, that measure is taken out of the conversation. And the way that the numbers are being portrayed or explained is based on the likelihood of incidents based on the things I mentioned before, like emissions and such. What we're struggling to figure out exactly, and different jurisdictions will be making policy on this. The Coastal Commission will be using this as the basis for policy decisions and recommendations in its own sea level rise guidance, which will be updated this year. When we do our own local coastal plans, we will be using different measures for different kinds of infrastructure and building. But the areas that seem to pertain the most for us moving forward are we're not really planning to the low scenario. The low scenario implies what we've seen to date, which is 0.3 meters of sea level rise by 2050. assuming that all the way through to 2100 and 2150 does not seem like a reasonable assumption. So it is, while it's possible, it's not a planning assumption. The next highest level is the low intermediate. There's an intermediate, intermediate high, and high scenario. And in all cases, the numbers are lower than they were at the last guidance. And that's simply because there's more data, there's more comparison, and there's more information coming from the scientists at NOAA and other agencies. So what we're trying to sort out right now is the policy guidance for when to use the intermediate high as the upper end for planning versus the high as the upper end for planning. And there will be more information coming out that's in print, so you don't have to try to absorb all this exactly. The challenge is that when you look at the high scenario, you're looking at the likelihood of incidents, the likelihood of it occurring, and that is at 1% or less. So from a planning standpoint, it's important to look at that and think about risk and think about how those numbers should be imputed into our planning, for example, for projects in Pacifica. It's a whole hazard risk and assessment kind of world for all kinds of hazards, and they're looking at how does sea level rise planning compare with hazard planning for such things as earthquakes and other hazards that we need to plan for. So more to come on that, but it is something that, you know, has been the basis of a meeting I had every day last week, including the holiday. I was, as I said before, grateful that I had no day job and only this to focus on. I was grateful to see several colleagues at the statewide meeting, which was our first quarterly meeting from the Coastal Cities Group, which was just an informational opportunity for people to hear about these numbers and this Ocean Protection Council update and to ask questions. So that occupied a good deal of my time this week. I did have a very interesting and exciting meeting with Councilmember Beer was there with the Economic Development Committee. They are looking to take their show on the road, if you will, and move meetings around to different places in town, following, of course, all of the posting requirements so that everyone knows where the meeting is. They're public meetings, but they're trying to visit different businesses, and the very first one was at Roundtable at Lindemar Center. So that was fun and a little bit different. They're busy at work planning the Blues and Brews event coming up April 27th. And then the subcommittees are looking at a number of other activities, putting together digital maps of hiking trails in Pacifica. A lot of things that people have said, you know, there really should be this thing. And the energy behind that on this Economic Development Committee is really, really exciting. And they're developing these, I guess you would call them in beta right now. They haven't been released yet because they're still testing, putting different activities together into a community calendar and such. So that's exciting. I was not able to attend the Library Advisory Committee meeting, although I appreciate the work of that committee. It's the third meeting that had occurred, and if there's anything urgent that should be shared, I'll rely on our city clerk, Coffee, to bring it forward because I wasn't there to hear it myself. As was mentioned, the Congressional Forum at the Democrats meeting, and that was very interesting to have and to see who of the many candidates for our congressional seat that's being vacated by Anna Eshoo, who came to Pacifica, and how they addressed the idea that they had or hadn't and what their knowledge of Pacifica was. Because of redistricting, Pacifica has been included with a number of other communities that it formerly hadn't been. But with Anna Eshu, she knows Pacifica because she represented Pacifica when she was on the Board of Supervisors many, many decades ago. And then more recently, she's, through the Assembly in California. So she's very familiar with us. And we've been really striving to make sure the candidates for that seat are, as beginning to become as well informed as she has been, and certainly as Jackie Spear was before her. The Pacifica Hall of Fame dinner was a wonderful experience. Once again, had the opportunity to attend with a few of my colleagues here, and every time I go to that, I learn something new and hear more about Pacifica, before many of the things that I knew when I moved here 30 years ago, what it was like for some of the sports at White Field. And I had to figure out, where's White Field a few years ago when that was first mentioned, but now I feel very in the know that it's, the Christian Bay, what's the name of the school? Pacific Bay School. So anyway, just a great evening, a lot of camaraderie, that was wonderful. And I think that's it. That's pretty much my report.
Christine.
Thanks, Sue. I want to start by thanking the Peace people for being here tonight and for all the work that you have put in to write this resolution that is not just one that you've copied from other cities, but that you clearly thought about our own city and our response to this horrible situation unfolding on the other side of the planet in Gaza and Israel. I've spent a fair bit of time the last few weeks talking with Delia and even our police chief, and coming to realize that while some of us, and I certainly would have really supported this call for peace and a ceasefire, that it becomes it has in other cities become a very toxic conversation, and that has actually brought more fear and harm because cities are getting people from outside their communities that come and spread this hate. And we saw enough of that when we had the Nazi Zoom bombing here. I watched that 60 Minutes episode right before coming here and was in tears. We're not getting a lot of the news of what's happening there. I don't know if you know. I mean, surgeons are having to perform amputations with no anesthesia at all. Children are dying. A doctor who has gone to the Ukraine and served there, came there, and she has never seen anything as bad here, where children are targeted, where ambulances are targeted, where hospitals are targeted. These are outside the normal international rules of warfare. I really encourage people to get informed and to contact our government. It is a humanitarian crisis in the works, and people, already 30,000 people have died, and right now they're concentrating them all in one area, and it could be very dangerous. And while Hamas is still there, and while the hostages haven't been released, something still needs to happen to prevent more innocent people from dying. So thank you all for being here and for your strong voices for peace and well representing our city, and whose name means peace. So thank you. I was going to say I haven't done as much because my mother's been in the hospital, but then I started writing my list, and I guess I did. But I missed some fun social events with you all, and I'm sorry about that. I met with Anita Reese and the Unhoused on the Coast group. We discussed the county encampment ordinance and actually the possible effects if so what's coming out of that are people may be fined with misdemeanors for not wanting to accept shelter. And the idea is you're either trying to get them into shelter or you're trying to ask them to leave the area the goal is good to try to get more people housed and in help, but there are some potential consequences that, we might not all be be happy about. And, if we're enforcing this on the coast, that in unincorporated areas, well, that's right next to us. So this may mean that the problem will be increasing in our own community too. And so the PRC is getting ready for what might come from that. There are 8 people still, 8 families on the wait list for the oversized vehicle spaces. I really wish we could do something about those 4 that have been on hold for a long time. I met with the Pacific Beach Coalition, and the last few years they used to do an Eco-Fest every year on Earth Day, and because of their own lack of capacity, they haven't, but they're going to try that again and actually have calling it a Whale Fest with a community learning event and a lot of children's activities. So I don't have the exact date in front of me, but save that, and they're looking for help. So please reach out to Lynn Adams if you can help with some of that. I had my first meeting one-on-one with Mark Berman, and it was good to get to know him and also talk about our coastal issues. And I was specifically showing him some of the things going on in Manor and talking about state policies that we might be needing. That's not me, good. I met with Aaron Peskin, who is the president of the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. And because I wanted to learn more about Sharp Park and what their plans were and what he thought about that. So we're continuing some conversations. Apparently they were really hoping a few years back that the county parks department would take it over. It's a money-losing proposition for San Francisco. Anyway, we'll continue some conversations with him. You guys have heard me mention the San Francisco littoral cell study about sand management before, and I wanted to ask him about that too. So that was calling for a partnership between San Francisco Daly City and us because we're all in the same sand movement area, and for some reason that report died. And so anyway, he and I are going to dig into that a little bit and see if that's something we can come back, because what it called for was for San Francisco to be helping us. And they have a lot more expertise and, coastal engineers and climate scientists on their city staff. So they really could offer us help if we could get that going again. Went to the Pacifica Dems, and thank you for that group for organizing that great event. Met with emergency preparedness, and I think we need to talk about charters soon. So I've had several conversations with the city manager. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you, Sue, for that excellent meeting and your leadership at the state level. I appreciated listening in on that conversation, and I still want to chat with you about that. One thing I did want to notice, besides I've been reading the OPC guidance too, and trying to understand, and while the sea level rise numbers have gone down a little bit, at least in the short term, they're more certain about the short term up to 2050. And part of what's sad is that, we're on this trajectory to 2050, and it's really too late to do anything because all that carbon is already still in the atmosphere. But what we do now is really important to what happens up to 2100. But one of the things they pointed out is that, it's not our flooding and so forth. It's not just sea level rise, but it's also the storms, which are increasing in quantity and in amount of water, and so there will be more flooding, and there will be more erosion happening more quickly because of that too. I met with, and I forgot his name, the executive director of Brilliant Corners. Sue Degree introduced me to him. So they work all over the state in building housing for developmentally disabled. So we had a quick half-hour introduction session, and we're going to do a little bit more research and then come back and meet with him again to see if there's interest in possibly doing a project in Pacifica. We had the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project meeting last Thursday that was well attended by over 100 people, and office hours with the consultants have not been announced yet as a date, but that's coming soon. And that'll be one joint session meeting where everyone can come in, send in questions ahead of time that'll be answered, and then people have opportunities to ask follow-up questions. And then I did a makeup session for my leadership training I missed because my mom was having surgery that day, and it was on emergency preparedness, which was really great. The really neat thing about the way these classes are done is that for each topic that we're handling, it's looked at from the government point of view, from the nonprofit point of view, and from industry point of view. So we had the Director of Emergency Preparedness for the county, who's this wonderful woman doctor, speak. And anyway, I've got a lot I'm bringing back to the Emergency Preparedness Committee, from that. But, and from the nonprofit sector, so Thrive is doing a lot of work with the nonprofits in the South Bay. I'm like, so what are you doing up here? And they're not yet. But there's the possibility of maybe organizing some training, and maybe this is something that emergency preparedness might be able to get involved with, but to help organize nonprofits to also be, second responders in an emergency where we'll need a lot more help. And then Genentech spoke, so they have their own emergency management, and so it's not just preparing themselves, but using companies to actually provide extra resources that cities don't have. So that might be another partnership we can look at with our businesses in town too. And they're soon going to be taking applications for next year's cohort. So it's just really been a great program. There's a few civics leaders, but there's also a lot of staff from different cities. So in my cohort is the Park and Rec director from South San Francisco, for example, and the planning and building director from Hillsborough, and so forth, and then other business leaders. So thank you.
Mary.
Hello, everyone. So my dear peace people, my dear Pacifica peace people, thank you. Your resolution is well thought out and beautiful. And I thank you for all of the years of advocacy and hard work that you have put in to bring peace to our community. I have seen what bringing a resolution to a local level city council meeting can do. We've seen it happen to our colleagues. And in my opinion, it created more suffering, more divisiveness, and the potential of more hatred. And so there's a couple things I heard in your comments tonight. Good people shouldn't remain quiet. I know I'm paraphrasing. And I want to respond to that. Because as an individual out in my community, I have chosen to put my heart and my time into creating safe space for my students to come to talk about what's going on in the world. A place where they can share their opinions and their fears. I have 4 beautiful Palestinian interns who I've had them since they were freshmen in high school, and now they're almost graduating college, and they are my interns who help me guide these groups of young people. And I feel like it's my role and my responsibility to make sure that those young Palestinian women feel heard, that they know that I'm supporting them in every way, that we support our students in every way we can, holding student walkouts, poster writing, anything that we can think of to make sure that our students are safe and held. And in particular, my 4 beautiful Palestinian interns. And so it's really important for not just my peace people, because that's how I consider you. I consider you my peace people. But that my community also understands where my heart is, and that good people do really good things that you might not even know about, that don't have to do with a resolution in front of City Council. And so that's my comment on that, and I only almost cried once. One of the good things about my colleagues and letting them go first, which I have to admit I do on purpose now. Did you notice that? Because they give such detailed descriptions of all of the meetings that I've been to. And so thank you very much, Tiger, for talking about the Pacifica Democrats Congressional Panel. It was really an awesome event. I appreciated it very much. Sue, for talking so deeply about our Economic Development Committee meeting. I will say one thing, and that's to bounce back on what you were saying about the charters, is that our Economic Development Committee just brought in their answers to all the surveys that we put out to each one of our charters. So we created a bunch of questions for our committee and commission members because we wanted to know what their experience is like. Like, do they feel heard? Do they feel like their work is important? How can we make changes within the committees and commissions so that they feel supported and as important as we think they are? And so those questions and those survey questions will lead to our discussions about the change in charters. And so the change in the emergency preparedness will be coming. That discussion will be coming up. So I wanted to make sure I commented on that. And Christine, thank you for mentioning our meeting with PRC. It's a pleasure to be in those meetings with you and Marge Davis and Anita Reese, because we're talking about PRC facilities and their needs and what we can do as a community to support those needs. I was invited to attend a youth mental and behavioral health summit held by the San Mateo County Youth Advisory Board. That was really wonderful to be able to represent Pacifica and be there for those young people, talking about what they need from us to feel safe and healthy. I had an update about Pacifica Pride. You'll be hearing some more about that as we move forward. It's the first weekend in June, June 1st. I attended the North Coast County Water District meeting where they had a beautiful tribute to our friend Jack Burgett. And it felt really good to be able to sit in the space with them because they saw Jack's work on the Water District Board, right? And we hear a lot about Jack's coaching and all the things he did with all the young people in our community. But when he retired, he joined the Water District Board, and he just took off running, and he put all of his effort in. So it was really cool to be able to be there and to hear about all the things that he did for the Water District and what he, the shoes that he left to fill. Because I don't know if they're going to be able to find someone to work as hard on that board as Jack did. I want to thank Horace Hinshaw for our Sports Hall of Fame dinner. Partially, it's kind of like a high school reunion because there's all these sports people there, and they're kind of rowdy at these dinners. You know, they're like, oh, and it's so fun. But it's very special. And we got to sit at the table with another Pacifica statesman, Mr. Mike Mooney. And so I feel like I've had this, I don't know why, this influx of getting to know these statesmen in our community, and I just feel so lucky because they're like legends, and Mr. Mooney just smiled the entire night, and it was great. Thanks.
Okay. And again, thank you to the Peace people. I do have actually fears about what could happen, even on the phone, because of the things that we went through before. And it does make me afraid. So thank you for coming forward, though. I went to so many things that other council members went to, the Democrats debate, the Coastal Cities group, the Josemidian event. I did in Council of Cities, Sports Hall of Fame. I met with Lori from Anna Eshu's office, which was good because I got to bring back just our issues to her. And while I was there, I talked to Ray Mueller for a little bit because we met in his office, and it's always nice to talk to him. I spent a week at meetings, so I would have thought my list would be really short, but there were meetings on housing, insurance, and many, many other things, because that was 4 long days. I had 2 Fog Fest committee meetings because we're trying to get things together for the Fog Fest. It's a very complicated and long issue. I also met with a community overcoming relationship abuse person on Speak Up. We have one-on-one meetings with them. They're coming to our realtor meeting. I've already gotten people who want to volunteer there, who want to donate clothes, and that was just a very short meeting. We selected people from city selection for the Housing Endowment and Regional Trust. Those are 3-year positions. I always wanted to be on that board, but with a 3-year position, I can't do it. So the most fun, I also went to the community meeting yesterday, and they were registering people to vote, and I had really nice conversations with the people who were there at Fairmont. It was a productive day for me. But the most fun thing I did in the last 2 weeks was I presented a proclamation. Thank you, Sarah, so much for writing the proclamation to 105 years and 5 days old Winona Harvey, who was such an amazing person. She walked in the room with no cane, no walker, no wheelchair. She lives in the Crespi Apartments, and she walks up Roberts Road. Wow. So amazing. She walked around, talked to everybody. She just was, it makes my hair stand up. And it was really an honor to be there. And they kept thanking me, and I kept saying, no, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all. I mean, it was really a great thing. 105, can you imagine? And just as young and chipper as could be at 105. So I know I went on and on about that, but it's because, we do a lot of really serious things, and sometimes when you get to do stuff like that, it's just great. So, thank you. Okay, staff communications.
Thank you, Mayor Vadalas, Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer, City Council members, Kevin Woodhouse, City Manager. I just have 2 quick communications I'd like to emphasize, as I have been recently in the Connect with Pacifica intro, our upcoming important meetings that we have. So Saturday, this Saturday on March 2nd is our local coastal land use plan meeting. It'll be at Terra Nova Theater. It begins at 9 a.m. It'll run most of the day. We'll end by 4 o'clock. There will be light breakfast, refreshments, and lunch as well outside of the theater, because you can't have food inside the theater. It also is a hybrid Zoom meeting, so that information has been posted, and we'll be going over a lot of the detail that are in the LCLUP recommended alternate modifications, and having a Q&A session with members of the public. So that should be productive on Saturday. Then the following Saturday, on March 9th, we'll have another all-day session, which is the City Council's annual strategic plan update session, and that will be here in the council chambers. On the floor will be set up using the screens, and that will begin I believe around 9 o'clock. We haven't posted the exact time yet, but I anticipate it to also be 9 with same kind of format, light refreshments and some lunch provided. And so we'll have a all-day strategic plan update session facilitated by the same facilitator as did last year's strategic plan development, Greg Larson. Those were the main 2 meetings that I wanted to announce. I'll say that this week there was the Thursday night Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project meeting. As Councilmember Bowles mentioned, great attendance from the public, over 100 folks, and that was on via Zoom, and showing and getting input on some of the amazing design that's happening for that project. Also, Wednesday night was the kickoff meeting for the police department community Community Academy, which is the first cohort of 16 residents that have, and actually a few city employees, the city rangers are participating in that as well. And that was a great kickoff session. I was able to attend and learn about those that are volunteering their time 1 night a week for 10 to 12 weeks roughly. And hopefully that program will be a success and will continue it in the future, and others in the community can apply and participate and learn, kind of take a deep dive into the workings of the police department. That completes my communications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, just one quick.
Me too.
Okay.
If I could.
Go ahead.
And I don't know if Director Peterson, maybe you have the exact information, but I noted on my calendar that the 9th is also a compost giveaway day through Recology. And the thing I'm not sure of is the location. In the past, I think they've used our yard on Palmetto, but maybe it's at where you take your extra recycling on Palmetto. Do you happen to know? No? Okay. We'll find out and get it posted and connect with Pacifica so that, because I understand that is like, you got to get in line and get your compost. So we may not be able to do that day because we'll be setting goals and such, but just for the other people in the community, or maybe people who need to know.
And then just really quick, I forgot to mention that we're having the Pacifica Youth Summit on March 16th at IBL School from 11 to 2, free lunch for everyone. Come on out, and I'll give you more information next time.
Thank you. Okay. There are no public hearings. Does anyone want to take a quick break before we start, or do you want to just go? Go? Go. Okay, go. Okay. The next item is an item for consideration, the 2023 Annual Progress Report on implementation of the housing element of the general plan, and the 2023 Annual Progress Report on implementation of other elements of the general plan. And we have a staff report. Christian?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members, Planning Director Christian Murdoch. We're here tonight to perform our annual ritual of complying with state law to report on progress implementing the city's housing element, as well as other elements of the city's general plan besides the housing element. As noted, these reports are required by state law. The city is obligated to consider these reports at a public meeting where the public can comment, and the city must transmit these reports to the state by April 1st of each year. And importantly, the council may recall with adoption of the 2022 general plan update, the city council determined that this should also be an opportunity to have the community provide input on what aspects of the general plan they feel may need to be updated or revisited in the following year. And so we've moved up this reporting period earlier than would typically be the case historically. Usually we would bring these reports in the March timeframe, and we've now brought them even earlier in February, so this information can feed into the city's strategic planning and goal setting process. City Clerk Coffee, I'm not able to advance the slides. Can you try to manually advance them just so we can get through? Next slide. So I'll start first with the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, or APR. This report must be prepared on a form provided by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. That has pros and cons. It standardizes the report from year to year and from agency to agency, but it's a little bit clunky to work with and difficult for the council and community to view in this type of reporting format. Those are issues beyond our control, and we apologize as the staff. This is the first year that we're reporting on the 6th cycle housing element, the 2023 through 2031 reporting period. And so you'll see just 1 year of housing production indicated in the reports for this year. The tables in the Housing Element Annual Progress Report cover a range of issues, primarily focused on the status of housing project applications, approvals, and the various stages of construction through occupancy. There's also a section on reporting on programs that are in the housing element. Very few of those have had action thus far, given how recent the city has adopted the new housing element. But of note, the city, for example, in last year's budget, began funding for the Housing Action Fund as one example, where we're really trying to lean into housing element program implementation as well. And the big takeaway of these annual reports is really about the city's progress in fulfilling its regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. The big number we're all aware of, the 1,892 units that the city's obligated to plan for and try to set the conditions to be approved and developed in the 8-year planning period. Some key observations from this year's Housing Element APR. The overall level of housing approvals, which the key metric for these reports is typically the building permits issued. Even though there are various stages or statuses that you'll also see reflected, we really only get quote unquote credit from the state for the building permits being issued in this report. That's 24 units this year as compared to 55 units last year. This year, we saw a significant increase in certificates of occupancy being issued, which is good news. It means these housing units are being completed through the construction and into the occupancy phase. That was 48 units this year, and 92% of those were accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. We also saw an increase in the number of units entitled. That's a term used for one of the earliest stages of housing review and approval. That's the public hearing stage, where you'll see the Planning Commission or the City Council approve a project. That's an early stage before getting to the building permit, construction, and then ultimately the occupancy stage. 78 units were entitled, 70 of those from the Pacifica School District's Workforce Housing Project, so a very important project for our community, and ultimately progressing, we hope, to the building permit and occupancy phase to not only get credit towards our RHNA, but to have really great places for people to live in our community. And then lastly, key observation, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, were a large share of the approved housing units. Again, this year, 71% of those units approved, 87% last year. While our overall numbers are small, ADUs are really carrying the load, if you will, in terms of the types of housing that's getting approved and constructed in our community. I do want to note, as it relates to the City Council's consideration and approval, after publishing the staff report, staff did further review some aspects of the report, and I would ask that any acceptance and approval of the report include these few modifications. The first is in relation to the Pacifica School District's project. We have the 70 units shown, but the way they were allocated across the income levels was incorrect and inconsistent. That project included 59 above moderate income units, 5 moderate income, and 6 lower income. We need to correct that in various places in the report. 407 Gateway Drive, that's one of the parcels that's part of the Villages at Pacifica apartment complex. We need to reclassify one of their accessory dwelling unit projects. It was incorrectly classified as a 5+ unit or multifamily unit project, and that'll change some of the reported figures in terms of ADU production versus other types of housing unit production and certificates of occupancy. And then lastly, in Table C, packet page 38, column 11, it describes the existing land uses of the housing element rezoning sites that were approved by the City Council. Those misaligned due to an administrative issue with the spreadsheet, and so we need to realign those uses with the correct parcels. Shifting now to the general plan annual progress report. Of course, the housing element is a part of the general plan, but state law requires us to report on that separately. So the second annual report we're required to prepare is on implementation of elements of the general plan other than the housing element. For us, that includes the economic sustainability element, community design, land use, circulation, open space and community facilities, conservation element, safety element, and noise element. And these are components of the 2040 general plan adopted by the council in 2022. On the land use element and noise element, no specific reportable action for this planning period. Of course, as the city reviews and approves projects, we are ensuring they're consistent with the land use element, so there's an ongoing component to this, but no specific or discrete programs were implemented. However, in other elements, the city's made major progress, notably on the economic sustainability element, reflecting the city's focus on economic development in 2023. Key accomplishments and ongoing work related to implementation of a marketing plan, the workation program to attract people to come and take midweek stays to remote work from hotel lodging in Pacifica, the Shop Pacifica campaign, encouraging people to shop locally and keep money in our community, and then the work preparing and completing the economic opportunities study in the Vision 2025. Other work on our housing, or on our general plan, rather, included the community design element. So, for instance, the Pacifica Workforce Housing Project approval related to high-quality site planning and building design as required by the community design element. The circulation element, the city has a number of ongoing programs to address mobility for all people, as evidenced with the variety of senior housing or senior transportation programs that the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Department administers. And then the open space and community facilities element, again, some key projects through PBNR as well as the Public Works Department for playground equipment replacement projects at priority parks. And then is, of course, the major Civic Center renovation project that we're all very excited about. In the conservation element, the city staff and community, with council's direction and support, initiated the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, or CAP task force and CAP update project, a major undertaking led by city staff and members of our community on the CAP task force. And then in the safety element, the city updated its emergency shelter ordinance, which furthers policies in the safety element related to siting and approvals of key infrastructure and facilities. And so the report essentially consists of the two parts, one being the form for the housing element report that's attached, and then the other being the general plan progress report consisting of the detailed discussion in the staff report. So staff would recommend that the council move to adopt a resolution approving the 2023 APRs on the housing element and general plan with the changes that staff identified, and directing the city manager to transmit these reports to the relevant state agencies as noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Council questions?
I have one.
Okay.
Could you clarify on the Gateway project, that ADU versus 5+ units? Is this, I remember hearing about a potential future project of building ADUs on that site. Is this part of that?
It is. In the detailed information, I think it's in tab A2 in the housing element annual progress report. The various building permits are issued, are listed there. You'll see there are 2 building permits for that Villages at Gateway, Villages at Pacifica apartment project on Gateway. I think there's a 20 unit and a 22 unit building permit for ADUs. And so they conducted that project in 2 phases to create ADUs on that existing apartment project. What's great is through the Affordable Housing Regulatory Agreement that the City Council approved in 2020, those units are going to be income limited to the low income or 80% area median income level at no additional expenditure on the city's part to create or acquire those lower income affordable housing units.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, first I just want to thank you for the report and for bringing it to us this way. And I know you have way too much on your plate for us to talk about adding anything to the general plan now, but I like that will be a room for discussion, as we move forward. So thank you. To follow up on the ADU question, and now I've forgotten how many you said total. Was it 770?
In terms of ADUs receiving building permits this year?
Yes.
Let me double check that figure. What I'd indicated is they were 71% of the approved units this year. So I think there were maybe 17, but let me double check the figure. Right, so 17 ADUs received building permits in 2023.
Okay, maybe my question was a little bit different. What I'm trying to understand is how many total, I guess, applications we had, and so 42 of those were for the villages, but just broader, are we getting a lot of applications for ADUs spread out through the rest of the town beyond this one site?
It varies. I would say my observation is it appears to me that the level of activity has perhaps decreased a little bit this year, or in the 2023 period, I should say. Perhaps a part of that is the more costly access to capital and funding to undertake those projects. When interest rates were low, it was much easier for people to access affordable financing to undertake those projects. But they've always been at a relatively low level, except for, I think, a really interesting year or two with the villages at Pacifica in particular, bringing in a large number of ADUs.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, and then obviously there are very few building permits issued this year, and do you get any more data about how long it's taking for a particular project to get a building permit? And are we getting less applications, or is it taking longer in the process? And that might be part of the reason those numbers are low.
I don't have any information to indicate that processing timelines for building permits are changing. What I will say is my observation seems to be that fewer planning sort of entitlement stage projects have been coming in, but those projects that are coming in or are anticipated to come in are much larger projects, which is uncharacteristic of the last many years in Pacifica. So we, I think should anticipate coming through the entitlement stage as it relates to the report, much larger projects than we have seen in a decade or more, potentially, perhaps several decades in Pacifica. The reasons for that are not entirely clear. Some of it, I think, is perceptions related to the builder's remedy and support, in the legislature for bigger projects that might not otherwise fit within a city's general plan. And some people are trying to exploit those. I think those theories are untested at this point in time, but that's, I think, the major change that I'm seeing in our development-related landscape for housing right now.
Right. And so I had asked the question of, so we've received these builder's remedy applications, but they're not yet recorded, are not required to be reported at this point for HCD, but would they be at some point as they move further along in the process?
Potentially. So when people hear about builder's remedies, really what that means most of the time is related to a law called SB 330, Senate Bill 330. It's a law that, among other things, creates a new type of application called a preliminary application. And so by and large, when people have heard about these builder's remedy projects in Pacifica, what they've heard about is that an SB 330 preliminary application has been filed. It doesn't have all of the information that's required to actually constitute an application to the city for development, but it's using a mechanism in the law to a developer's advantage to essentially lock in the regulations and to take advantage of some other provisions in that law. And so when those applications may come in with what's called a regular application, or the type of application you would need to file for development, and when that application is deemed complete through the city's review process, then it would be eligible for reporting in this housing element form. And those applications may come in or they may not. Applicants have 180 days to submit an application following a preliminary application, and not all of the developers do follow up in that regard. And furthermore, not all of them then process through those applications to completeness, which would then put it on this report.
Okay, so at this point, we don't have any that, of the 6, I think, that we have that have been determined to have a complete application.
That's correct. That's why they're not reported here.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll ask for public comment. Would you like to speak? No? Is there anyone on the phone? No? So I will close the public comment and bring it back to the council. Go ahead.
Sarah, if you could put the recommend action back up. I'm happy to make a motion unless there's further discussion or questions. I do want to say thank you. I appreciate that council has given you, as is too often the case, additional work to do with what's mandated by the state and for the sake of our community. I appreciate that it's done and done with style, so thank you. I move to adopt a resolution approving the city's 2023 annual progress report on implementation of the housing element of the general plan and the 2023 annual progress report on implementation of other elements of the general plan with the changes identified by staff, and directing the city manager to transmit the reports to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote.
Waiting for one more vote, looks like. There we go.
Now we probably missed it all.
Do we need to do it again? No.
No.
With the motion made by Councilmember Big Stick and seconded by Councilmember Bowles for item number 4 with the changes proposed by staff, the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you, Planning Director Murdoch.
Thank you.
Might as well move on.
Keep moving.
Let's go. Okay. The next item, sorry, pages. Purchasing, sorry, I'm not on the page.
Uh-oh.
Packet page 48.
Hold on.
You want me to?
Yes, please.
Oh, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say. Hello.
Okay, I have it.
There you go.
Sorry. This item is item number 5, modifications to the City of Pacifica purchasing policy. The proposed action is to adopt a resolution approving modifications to the City of Pacifica Administrative Policy Number 76, Purchasing Policy. And we have Yulia Carter and Lisa Peterson.
Madam Mayor and City Council, so the item before you tonight is a consideration of revisions to the purchasing policy. So tonight we are asking you to adopt a resolution approving modifications to the Pacifica Administrative Policy Number 76, also known as a purchasing policy. And I guess the clicker is not working. So the next slide. So first, I want to step back and just point out that there are 3 layers when it comes to governmental purchases. So the first one is kind of broader. The California Government Code requires every local agency to adopt policies and procedures to govern the purchases, which we have in place. And Pacifica Municipal Code, Title 3, Chapter 4, identifies the city manager as a purchasing officer, and the Chapter 15 also defines bidding procedures for public projects. And finally, the next layer is administrative or internal policies related to purchasing. And the city adopted administrative policy number 76, titled as Purchasing Policy in 2014. So this policy covers regulations, purchasing officers and department responsibilities, and also approval limits.
And this is the subject of our discussion tonight. So the next slide. I want to spend a couple minutes outlining the factors driving this request for change. As we are preparing for the upcoming goal-setting meeting, where we will be bringing updates to the Council on the status of the strategic plan, I also want to highlight that one of the Council's strategic goals is enhancing organizational stability. And among other things, this means pursuing operational efficiencies, minimizing staff workload, and also recognizing staffing limitations citywide. So another change, or another reason why we are bringing this policy to you tonight is that the purchasing limits have not been reviewed for the last 10 years since the policy was adopted 10 years ago, and these limits, well, frankly, no longer meet the organizational needs, and especially in the environment when cost of CPI index reached as high as 7% in the last few years, as we all painfully know. And also, well, again, in this environment, the limits staying unchanged for 10 years is just not sufficient. And other agencies actually made corresponding adjustments already. And finally, we are bringing this policy to you tonight because we believe it will streamline purchasing process and procedures while the appropriate controls and accountability will be still in place. It will help us achieve better operating efficiencies by just freeing up some staff time. So all the purchases and purchase orders were done by one single accounting technician, and the workload associated with this, again, with the increasing workload is quite substantial. And again, as you well know, finance is also going through the ERP project with taking a lot of resources. Next slide. So now let's go into specific recommendations that we're asking you to approve tonight. So the first one is increasing the purchase order threshold from 5,000 to 15,000. So there are some administrative impacts of the purchase order processing process that I want to highlight here. Well, first of all, the purchase order is a form of agreement between the purchasing agent, which is a buyer, and the vendor, a seller, specifying some details such as items, quantity, price. PO process definitely helps with expense control for larger purchases, for projects and services, because it requires multiple levels of approval and supporting documentation such as contracts, bids, quotes, business licenses, insurance certification. But when it comes to small purchases, these requirements could be somewhat cumbersome and result in some counterproductive paperwork. So I want to highlight that necessary controls for smaller purchases below the PO threshold could be still achieved and usually achieved through the existing internal controls and accounts payable process, which still requires at least 3 levels of approval to ensure a proper oversight, as well as expense monitoring, record keeping of invoices and receipts, and compliance with internal policies. So on this slide, you can see in the middle of the slide the table. We've done a little bit of analysis going back to 3 years, analyzing how many purchase orders were processed under what threshold. And you can see that almost 30% of all purchase orders were exactly for this small bucket category between 5 and 10,000. And another 12% in 10 to 15,000 threshold. So raising the purchase order threshold requirement to 15,000 would potentially alleviate the administrative burden by eliminating nearly 100 purchase orders each year, which is about 40+% of total purchase orders. And again, keep in mind that it's not just creation of the purchase order, it also requires some processing, monitoring throughout the fiscal year until it's exhausted.
And I also want to highlight, and this is why Director Peterson is here, so almost 55 out of this 100 plus purchase orders, so which is about 55%, originated in public works. And this is one of the major operating departments tasked with prompt response to critical infrastructure failures and emergencies, and hopefully spending less time on administrative overhead. So this is why we are asking you to consider increasing the threshold for purchase orders as one administrative change. And we can go to next slide. So the second recommended change is an increase in purchasing limits itself. So this new recommended purchase limits are listed here. The city manager recommends that the approval authority for department heads, assistant city manager, and city manager will increase. So department head authority would increase from 10,000 currently to 15 to 25. The assistant city manager authority would increase from 25 currently to between 25 and 40,000, and the city manager's authority would increase from 50,000 currently to 75. Again, similar to PO threshold argument, this adjustment would also improve some staff efficiency, or at least the time spent on administrative time and preparing the staff reports, and also improve timeliness in managing contracts and purchases. And just a few other statistical data for your consideration here. We bring about 15 new contract approvals agenda items every year, seeking approval for new contracts between 50 and 75,000. Again, going back, we did this analysis for the last 3 years. And a similar number of staff reports are generated for task orders and contract amendments related to existing contracts. So as you can imagine, agendizing these purchasing agreements and preparing reports and agenda materials often result in longer project timelines. And especially when it comes for smaller projects, it could be time sensitive. And it may cause some delays in project delivery. So again, so this is why we're asking for your consideration to increase purchasing limits. And we can go to the next slide. And on the subject of increasing city manager's authority, we looked at Pacifica benchmark cities in San Mateo County to compare city manager's authority limits. And you can see here on this chart, the average limit between the cities we typically compare ourselves to is 80,000. So Pacifica ranks among the 4 cities with the lowest city manager's authority at 50,000. And notably, the other 3 cities in this category are Millbrae, Belmont, and Foster City. All the cities are smaller in population than Pacifica. And other cities smaller than Pacifica, such as St. Carlos, Burlingame, and Menlo Park, have a city manager's authority of at least 75,000. And finally, the city manager's authority in cities slightly larger than Pacifica varies, reaching up to 100,000 in Redwood City and San Mateo, and up to 150,000 in South City. So increasing city manager's authority limit to 75,000 will be in alignment with other San Mateo County agencies. And again, I want to highlight that financial oversight, accountability, and required controls will be still achieved through already in place the approval workflows and internal controls that are being tested annually by independent audit firm through the interim and final audit process that we do every year and report back to you on its results. So the next slide. So there are a few other recommended amendments that we want to bring forward. So just for clarity, I want to highlight that city manager's authority
For design professional services will also increase to 75,000, and you see it in your red line edits. Another one is section 3.42, clarified that the contracts for ongoing services, that additional ongoing services that happen every year will be determined for the maximum amount to be paid in a given contract or fiscal year and not cumulative. And finally, the policy intends to allow the city manager to approve a contingency up to 10% of the original contract unless contingency already specified and included in agreement. For example, construction contracts typically have their own contingency approvals built in, so that wouldn't be applicable here. So staff realized that the proposed policy change language could be clearer in this section, so we want to correct language here. And so tonight in this presentation, we want to highlight that the sections 3.36 and 3.51 on pages 61 and 64 in your packets should read as follows. The purchasing officer may, as needed, increase any purchase order issued by an amount of up to 10% for additional services, goods, and equipment not anticipated at the time of the purchase order was issued, which increase may cause the total purchase order amount to exceed to authority maximum described in 3.3.1 for the city manager by an amount of up to 10%. And again, the identical language in the section 3.5.1. That's what the city manager recommends at this point. And I also want to clarify that only city manager as a purchasing officer would have this authority. So it will not be applicable to department heads or assistant city manager or any other staff members. And all contingency exceeding 10% will still require council approval. Next slide. So that brings me to the last slide. Staff recommends, city manager recommends that the City Council adopt a resolution approving modifications to the City of Pacifica Administrative Policy number 76, also known as Purchasing Policy, with additional modifications to sections 3.3.6 and 3.51 as presented by staff. So with that, we'll happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions from council? Christine.
Sorry, I don't remember if it was I think it was the 3.5.1. You said only the city manager has the ability to approve those. That's for the 10% overage? That only, so if Public Works or some other department had, they have to stick to the contract amount, not they don't have a 10% overage on there.
Correct. So it's so the policy would allow city manager to exercise discretionary contingency.
Okay.
And the city manager is a purchasing officer for the city, so no other staff would have the same authority.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I'm not sure what, maybe you can go back to the 3.4.2 about ongoing contracts. I didn't quite understand that. So, for example, if we had a contract with Group 4 for the design and their contract was over several years for $500,000.
So typically this would apply to ongoing services. Let's say we have a contract with the dispatchers, right, or CSG, like for augmentation of staff. So something that happens on an ongoing basis every year, so that's where we want to count this in a given year. So you would not be looking at cumulatively how much was spent on the dispatchers.
You're not limited to the 75,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And do the contracts have a yearly maximum amount typically?
So right now, we bring contracts for renewals to you. So let's say you renew the contract for another 2 years or 3 years, and that's the total number that is being counted, which is to be, well, frankly, it's a little bit cumbersome because it's very hard to create a purchase order because you create a purchase order in a given year, but then you have to review the contract again and see and add additional purchase order in the next year, et cetera, et cetera. So this provision would actually simplify the process for ongoing services only. So all the project-based services would be still subject to project, right?
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Any other questions? Any members of the public wish to speak on this? And fill out a card after, please.
I will, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, on this item, number 5, want to point out and ask that you consider that raising the purchasing authority for the city manager effectively will reduce the number of agenda items at some point in time, but it will also reduce the council's ability for input, questions, and approval, which then effectively reduces the ability for the community to have input. So I just would ask that you would consider that while you're making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, is there anyone on the phone? Seeing no one on the phone, we'll bring it back to council. Any deliberation? Tiger, I can't see it.
Yeah, I think as somebody who has spent a great deal of time on the other side of the dais, the point is not lost on me that decisions like these would seem to reduce the amount of awareness the community at any given point might be taking in. That being said, having spent now a little time on this side of the dais also and having some familiarity on the kinds of expenditures we're signing off on a regular basis, I'm not worried that anything substantial is going to get lost in the mix by signing off on this. I think that it's rare that we have an opportunity to try and alleviate any measure of the workload whatsoever. And I'm very grateful that this opportunity is before us, that unlike most issues that come up, we can actually say, hey, let's not make it harder for you this once. So I'm looking forward to and excited to vote yes on this, seeing very little, if anything, lost in the mix.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, Tiger. Thank you for that. We do not get to do that very often.
And the comparison to the other cities, too, is really important to see where the other cities fall in the same arrangement.
Yeah. And just wanted to add, too, that, we are still reviewing the overall budget every year, right? So, and it's not like they can just add a big new item. Yeah, I think, we trust our staff to do their work, and there are policies that they have to get 3 bids too. So, they're making sure that the number is fair that we're getting. So I'm in favor too. And thank you for
Mayor,
finding these ways.
a point occurred to me just as the speaker was talking about that, and I think Ms. Carter pointed it out, but I did just want to emphasize it. While the dollar threshold amount is higher, what that amount purchases is not higher. So 10 years ago, when 50,000 was the threshold and you could purchase certain supplies or contractual services, that now costs, because of inflation, at least probably 75,000 or more. So what you're actually purchasing and what comes to council for approval of what's being purchased really hasn't changed by this. It's sort of playing catch up on this administrative efficiency.
I have a follow-up on that comment. In these kinds of policies, is there any mechanism by which they're pegged to consumer price index or inflation or some kind of way that they are automatically ratcheted? Or is that something like what we're doing tonight, whereas periodically you stop and go, whoa, we haven't accounted for this because we haven't looked at these numbers in 10 years or something?
The council can add additional CPI increase built in the resolution, so we can make this change if that's the desire of the council. And in this case, every year, the purchasing policy will be revised to apply this CPI index to these limits that you had on the slide.
Does anyone? It's funny because I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking about the cost of breakfast. I mean, and how much it's risen. It was, Tiger?
I did want to say one last thing. I've noticed that Assistant City Manager Carter's signature appeared on 3 out of the 5 items on this agenda. And while it seems to us probably to seem like a light agenda, probably because of the inordinate amount of work that the planning department has been doing getting us ready for Saturday's meeting, it's not lost on me that if not a majority of work appears to have been performed by Assistant City Manager, not the least for this item. So thank you for all the work you've done to give us an agenda this week.
Thank you.
And City Clerk, if you wouldn't mind putting the recommended motion on the thing, just because I know there's adjustment based on the staff recommended changes through the presentation. I want to make sure we get the wording right.
Just be as amended.
As amended?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, is staff interested in an automatic CPI adjustment, or was that too complicated at this point?
That was part of my thought, does that make it more work to have to track that in some way, or is that something that can be programmed?
Well, it doesn't add more work, so what we could do, we could bring this policy to you annually with the budget, which we usually do, well, probably not this year, because we're having this conversation now, but usually, you usually review investment policy every year, so if there are any changes that need to be made, so that would be the time to do it, and that could be just incorporated in the process. And CPI index is easy enough to apply.
Well, I think it should be done. I think it would keep it current and keep it from falling with large gaps from, holding back. When I looked at the chart on population, Daly City's an outlier in terms of its levels, but we definitely need to increase this because of when you consider the number of population that we have, the amount of work that needs to be done, and I feel like including a CPI piece to that would make sense. I don't know. Did you make a motion, though? No, not yet. Okay. So I don't know how to phrase that or what.
But I think she's asked, I think if I understood you correctly, Assistant City Manager, you don't necessarily need this revised now, but this could be something that you bring to us as part of the budget.
Well, you can make this motion now and we'll just incorporate it.
Oh,
but
I
if
see.
you want
Okay.
to revisit
Sorry, I
it,
misunderstood.
well, if you want, we can bring it back to you what those, but this year the limits will not change.
Right.
So we already given you the limits, so this is the starting point.
Yeah.
So if we were going to amend the motion, it would be to,
As amended by staff, including the amendments to section, what were those section numbers? 3 point.
Right, 3.3.6, 3.51 is presented by staff, but the CPI,
As long as, in addition to a CPI increase
Yearly.
annually.
okay, so I move that
We will figure out where it goes, but I just need you to highlight those 3 amendments that staff will be incorporating into the policy.
by number. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I move adopting the resolution approving modifications to the City of Pacifica Administrative Policy Number 76 with additional modifications to sections 3.3.6 and 3.5.1 as presented by staff, and adding an annual increase according to the CPI, Consumer Price Index.
Second.
Please vote.
And with the motion, with the amendments made by Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer and seconded by Councilmember Big Stick, the motion passes unanimously.
And it is 9:08. And I would like to adjourn this meeting in memory of Andy Pappas, the Crab King. And if anybody would like to make remarks, that would be appreciated. Tiger.
I'm starting because I don't feel like I probably know him as well as the rest of y'all did, but I will say that it was in recent memory that I had the opportunity to help place a sign on his property, as he was wont to allow anybody that space. And it was this amazing space off Highway 1, and he was very generous that if somebody were running for office, he would allow them that opportunity to get their message out further. And so thank you for contributing to our community. I got that smallest taste of it, and I'm grateful to have done so.
I'll just add that I didn't get to know Andy until a couple of years ago, and he was such a delightful person, so full of stories and full of history of the town, something along the line of when we were talking about the Sports Hall of Fame and such. It was so great to hear stories. I loved seeing his flag, depending on the sport of whatever season we were in. You could see the Giants flag flying, you could see Warriors, you could see whatever it was. And he also has very proud, and I saw something on Facebook, Greek history, Greek traditions in his family, so occasionally the Greek flag would be up there as well. And so just, I'm going to miss him. He was really an asset to our community, and his love for our pier and for the access that it provided for so many, that was just an absolute passion for him, something that he and I spoke of, and I really am hopeful and carrying in my mind that in his honor and his desire to see that continue to be a community and a regional resource for people. So I've got it on my mind, Andy.
Yeah, I also want to say that having the opportunity to speak with him when I asked if I could hang a sign, that was the first time I met him after hearing about him for so many years. And yes, he was delightful. It was like you just wanted to break out some tea and cookies and spend the rest of the day with him, because he knew so much about Pacifica, things that I wouldn't think about. Kind of like a Mike O'Neill, if you would, right? And so I really appreciated his, again, generosity. He didn't question anything about me or my politics or anything like that. He was just like, if you want to hang that sign, you can hang that sign. And that's pretty lovely. And for years and years, I have, depended on those flags, right? It's just something that you get used to looking for. And so, thank you, Andy.
I got to meet with him a couple of times, starting with the sign to an introduction from Sue Degree, and sitting in his living room with that amazing view that he got to enjoy for all these years, looking at all of Pacifica. What a special place. He told me that his wife actually hated crab, couldn't stand the smell of it. He had to keep all that downstairs away from her in their kitchen and give away a lot of it. So I think he was probably, I don't know the stories of him being a great crab catcher, but he was also a great crab giver in the community. And, he loved Tams and
ginger beef with extra ginger.
There you go. And Mazzetti's, too, were his favorites. And anyway, I got to share some treats with him too. We'll miss you, Andy.
I liked in his article where he liked to sit out in his front yard and gather people around, and that's where he did his interview that he did with Jean Bartlett when she wrote the story about him. And while they were doing the interview, people came up to talk to him. And I think lately Eric has been putting up the flags because I don't think Andy could do it, and that's really nice that he continued Andy's tradition of putting flags up. He used to come in my office, and even as he got older, he always remembered my name, which I find amazing too, because he was in his 90s and he knew who I was because I helped him one time. So it was really, and I did put my sign up there, a little big, but I put, my name is long, you know? So anyway, I had to make it a little longer. Wanted everyone to see. So I appreciate him, and again, we adjourn this meeting in his memory. So thank you all, and good night.